Sleep debt is triggering systemic metabolic failure, consumer wearables are causing an epidemic of orthosomnia, and the algorithmic nocebo effect is actively destroying your cognitive performance. Welcome to a special edition of the DJAMGAMIND Rundown. I am your host, Anna. Today we perform a forensic autopsy on sleep tech's data trap. Sleep is a highly active, metabolically restorative neurological process. When the human nervous system is subjected to chronic sleep restriction, it experiences a systemic crisis analogous to a continuous denial of service attack on corporate infrastructure. This sleep debt causes an immediate endocrine failure, crashing leptin levels and surging ghrelin, which tricks the brain into perceiving a severe energy deficit, driving uncontrollable weight gain. To combat this, tech executives have turned to consumer sleep wearables like Oura and Whoop. But this has birthed a new psychiatric phenomenon called orthosomnia, an obsessive preoccupation with achieving perfect digital sleep metrics. Waking up to a poor readiness score triggers the algorithmic nocebo effect, initiating a stress response that spikes cortisol and immediately lowers heart rate variability. The tracker itself becomes the source of nervous system hyperarousal. Before we dive into the data, I have a brief strategic request. The algorithms governing the app you are listening on right now dictate what intelligence reaches your feed. To ensure you never miss our most critical forensic autopsies, please hit follow or subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. Let's unravel the science.
Before we begin today's briefing, a note for the brands listening. If you want to reach the true architects of the AI revolution, the technical leaders actually building the stack, not just the tourists, DJAMGAMIND offers select premium partnership opportunities. Let us position your product directly in front of the ultimate technical buyer. Visit jamgamind.com/partners.
You know, if you were to sit down and read about a massive coordinated cyber attack, you'd probably picture something out of a movie, right?
Right, like some hacker in a dark basement room somewhere.
Exactly, just hammering away at a keyboard, targeting some giant corporate server.
Yeah.
And they launch what the IT world calls a denial of service, or a DOS attack.
Where they essentially just flood the target system.
Yeah, they flood it with so many malicious requests, just an unbelievable amount of junk data, that the infrastructure completely collapses. I mean, the server just wasn't built to handle that kind of relentless pressure, so it crashes.
It's basically a classic hardware failure driven by sheer overload. I mean, the system has built-in protective mechanisms, obviously.
Right, the fail-safes.
Exactly. But once you breach a certain threshold of continuous stress, those fail-safes simply shatter.
They just break. But here's the thing. What if that server isn't, a rack of blinking computers in a temperature-controlled data center? What if the infrastructure under attack is your own body?
That is a terrifying pivot, but it's incredibly accurate.
It is, because today we are opening up a massive and honestly somewhat terrifying stack of sources. We've got neuroscience literature, macroeconomic data, and some absolutely wild clinical case studies.
Truly wild.
And our mission today for this deep dive is to perform a kind of forensic autopsy on a very modern epidemic. We are looking at what we're calling the algorithmic hijack of rest.
I really like that framing. Because
Yeah.
as we sifted through the clinical literature you brought in, a very distinct and honestly slightly cynical narrative emerged.
Cynical is the perfect word for it.
It really is. We are seeing these incredibly driven, high-performing people who are desperately trying to optimize their rest. They're exhausted, so they're turning to big tech to solve their fatigue.
Right, they want a software patch for a hardware problem.
Exactly. But by outsourcing their biology to consumer sleep trackers, they are stepping into this algorithmic trap that is actively destroying their physiological health.
And I want to pause right here and speak directly to you, the listener. Just think about your own mornings for a second. Have you ever woken up, stretched, felt perfectly fine, maybe even energetic?
Ready to take on the day.
Right. And then you glance at your smartwatch, you check your app, and it gives you a terrible readiness score. And suddenly, almost instantly, you feel heavy and just, exhausted.
It's like a switch flips.
Yes. In this deep dive, we are going to explain the exact neurobiology of why that happens.
But, to really understand that technological trap, we first have to take a really hard look at the biological crisis driving it.
The root cause.
Exactly. We have to diagnose the underlying hardware failure. Because people aren't just buying these devices for no reason. They're buying them because chronic sleep debt is utterly devastating.
It ruins you.
It does. When you chronically restrict your sleep, you are literally launching that DOS attack on your central nervous system.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I know I'm definitely guilty of burning the candle at both ends. So what is the actual target of this biological DOS attack?
Well, the primary casualty is a tiny cluster of, I think it's thousands of cells in your hypothalamus. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, the medical literature usually just calls it the SCN.
The SCN. So what is its actual job when I haven't, completely crashed it by staying up all night?
It's your body's master biological clock. It literally coordinates the timing mechanisms for virtually every single tissue and organ you have.
Every organ. Wow.
Yeah, to give you a sense of scale here, roughly 40% of the entire human genome cycles under direct circadian regulation.
Wait, 40%? That's almost half our DNA.
Exactly. Normally, specialized cells in your retina sense ambient light, specifically blue light from the sun, and they signal the SCN to align your entire metabolism with the rotation of the planet.
But I'm guessing my laptop screen at midnight is a problem.
It's a massive problem. When you stay up until 2 a.m., bathed in the artificial light of a screen, you're feeding the SCN conflicting data. You destabilize the master clock.
I see. And when that clock gets out of sync, things start breaking down. I was reading through Dr. Guy Leschziner's research in our source stack, and he talks about this leading to a complete endocrine failure.
Yes.
But I'll admit, the medical terminology there gets a bit dense for me. What does an endocrine failure actually look like for someone waking up after, say, 4 hours of sleep?
Right. Well, it looks like a catastrophic hormonal malfunction. And it specifically targets your appetite. Your body relies on two main hormones to manage energy, leptin, and ghrelin.
Okay, leptin and ghrelin.
Right. So leptin is produced by your fat cells. Its job is to essentially tap the brain on the shoulder and say, hey, we have plenty of stored energy. We are full. We don't need food.
Got it. And the other one?
Ghrelin. That's secreted by your stomach. It's the hunger hormone. It basically screams, we are starving. We need calories right now.
Okay, so leptin is the brakes and ghrelin is the gas pedal.
Precisely. Now, under the acute stress of sleep debt, this entire pathway just completely fails.
Oh, no.
Yeah, your circulating leptin levels drop off a cliff, the brakes are gone, and simultaneously you get a massive, uncoordinated surge of morning plasma ghrelin.
Wow. So it's like the fuel gauge on your car is broken and screaming empty.
Yes.
Even though the tank is actually full. And your prefrontal cortex, which I guess is the driver in this analogy, is just too exhausted to realize the gauge is lying to you.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Uh-huh.
Your brain genuinely perceives a severe starvation event, even if you just ate a huge dinner the night before.
Yeah, explains so much.
And you hit the nail on the head mentioning the prefrontal cortex. That's the seat of your executive function, your impulse control. Sleep restriction physically depresses metabolic activity in that exact area.
So the rational adult in the room goes to sleep.
Exactly. The rational adult goes completely offline. But at the exact same time, your brain's primal reward networks, areas like the amygdala and the nucleus accumbens, they become hypersensitized to dopamine.
Which perfectly explains why, when I'm exhausted, I never, ever crave a salad.
Never. Nobody does.
Yeah. I want the most hyper-palatable, ultra-processed, sugary garbage I can possibly find. My impulse control is just gone, and my brain is basically hunting for a quick dopamine hit just to stay awake.
You're caught in a perfect metabolic storm. And to show you just how damaging this is long-term, the data in our stack points us to the Nurses' Health study.
Oh, right. This was a massive study.
Massive. This wasn't some small, 6-week trial with college students. They tracked over 70,000 participants for 18 years.
18 years of tracking. That's incredible.
And the researchers found that individuals who slept less than 6 hours a night had a massive, persistent trajectory of weight gain compared to those sleeping 7 or 8 hours.
18 years of data. I mean, that completely undercuts this whole narrative of hustle culture.
How so?
Well, society tells us that being tired and eating junk food is just a willpower issue, like you're just weak. But it's not a lack of discipline, is it? It's a fundamental biological hardware failure.
That is the key takeaway here. But, we really can't stop at just the metabolic impact. Because the reason this leads us to the technology trap is that running on fumes actively degrades our highest level cognitive functions.
Right.
And in a modern knowledge economy, cognitive degradation costs real money.
So let's talk about that cognitive cost, because the physical side sounds miserable, obviously. But if you're a high-powered executive or a software programmer, you might think you can just push through the hunger with enough coffee.
A lot of them try.
Right. So what happens to the brain's actual processing power?
The clinical comparisons here are extremely sobering. Let's say you've been awake for 17 to 19 hours. Maybe you woke up early for a cross-country flight, and now you're working late in a hotel room.
Pretty standard corporate scenario.
Very standard. Neurologically speaking, your cognitive performance drops to a level equivalent to having a 0.05% blood alcohol concentration.
Wait, really? A 0.05 BAC just from staying up a bit late?
Just from that. And it gets worse.
Yeah.
If you push that continuous wakefulness to 24 hours...
A classic college all-nighter.
Exactly. If you do that, your neural function degrades to the equivalent of a 0.10% BAC.
You are legally drunk at that point.
You are legally impaired.
That is insane. I mean, your working memory, your emotional regulation, your ability to read a room in a high-stakes negotiation, it's all severely compromised.
Entirely compromised.
And so essentially, hustle culture means we have people showing up to manage teams, trade millions in stocks, or even perform surgery, legally impaired.
Yes.
But because it's sleep deprivation instead of vodka, society applauds their incredible work ethic.
It's an incredibly dangerous double standard. We're rewarding the exact behavior that is crashing the system.
It makes no sense.
And the macroeconomic fallout from this is staggering. According to a massive study by the Rand Corporation we looked at, the United States loses an estimated $411 billion annually due to chronic sleep deficiency.
$411 billion, with a B.
With a B. That's over 2% of the entire U.S. GDP just vanishing. And it's all because of fatigue-related errors, absenteeism, and lost productivity.
Over $400 billion. Well, no wonder people are so desperate for a fix. They feel terrible physically, their mental performance is slipping, their companies are losing money, and so they look for a solution.
But the tragedy is how they try to solve it.
Right, because instead of changing their lifestyle, they try to buy a software patch. They turn to consumer sleep tech. You know, the smart rings, the wristbands, the apps.
And that is exactly where the narrative takes a very dark turn. Because in their desperate bid to regain control over their biology, they step directly into a psychological minefield.
The investigative research calls this the quantification trap, right?
The quantification trap, yeah.
I love that term. It sounds like a sci-fi thriller. But what does it actually look like in practice?
Well, it starts innocently enough. You want data to make better choices about your health. But sleep is a qualitative, highly complex biological process. When you try to force it into a gamified, optimized suite of daily metrics on a screen, you open the door to a relatively new psychiatric phenomenon. It's called orthosomnia.
Orthosomnia. Okay, I know insomnia is the inability to sleep, and ortho usually means straight or correct, like orthodontics. So is this an obsession with having correct sleep?
That's exactly it. It was coined back in 2017 by researchers Dr. Kelly Glaser-Barron and Dr. Saber Abbott.
Okay.
And orthosomnia is defined as an unhealthy, obsessive preoccupation with achieving perfect sleep metrics, specifically as dictated by a consumer tracking device.
So people become so obsessed with getting a high score on their app that the anxiety of getting the high score actually keeps them awake.
It's the ultimate dark irony. By trying to perfectly quantify their rest, users are outsourcing their own internal bodily awareness to proprietary machine learning algorithms.
They stop trusting themselves.
Exactly. They stop asking themselves, how do I feel today? And start asking their watch, how am I supposed to feel today? This hyperfixation puts their nervous system into a state of chronic hyperarousal. And biologically, that perfectly mimics the clinical model of psychophysiological insomnia.
I want to make this real for the listener because the clinical case studies in our stack are absolutely mind-blowing.
They're genuinely hard to believe.
Yeah. There was this one case of a 27-year-old woman who went to a sleep specialist because her wristband told her she was having severely fragmented sleep. She was terrified she was sick.
Right. So the clinic brings her in and hooks her up to polysomnography.
Which is the medical gold standard using actual EEG brainwaves, right?
Yes, actual clinical instrumentation. And what did the clinical data reveal?
It showed her sleep architecture was completely normal. She was getting plenty of deep restorative sleep. There was nothing wrong with her.
But the crazy part is her reaction to that good news.
Yes. When the specialist showed her the medical data and tried to reassure her, She rejected it.
Flat out rejected it.
She flat out refused to believe the doctor, arguing that her consumer fitness tracker was more accurate than medical-grade instrumentation.
That right there is the pure manifestation of the quantification trap. She surrendered her reality to big tech.
It's terrifying.
And it doesn't just manifest as denial. There was another case study of a 39-year-old man who was so driven to maximize the total sleep duration metric on his app
Oh, we remember this one.
that he started spending hours and hours just lying in bed awake, trying to force his body to sleep longer just to get a better score.
Which, if you know anything about cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is the absolute worst thing you can do.
The worst.
You're supposed to get out of bed if you can't sleep, so your brain doesn't associate the mattress with frustration and wakefulness.
Right. He was actively destroying his brain's association between his bed and rest. He was inadvertently reinforcing his own insomnia just to appease an algorithm on his phone.
It is so wild.
The clinical research actually measures this specific behavior using something called the Bergen Orthosomnia scale.
Okay, what does that measure?
It looks at two main dimensions: interference and rigidity. Interference is when worrying about your sleep data actively ruins your mood and focus during the day.
Like you're distracted by a bad score.
Exactly. And rigidity is when you rigidly alter your life, like canceling social plans, avoiding your partner, going to bed at odd hours, just to satisfy the sleep tracker's rules.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because we're talking about this like it's purely a psychological quirk, right? Just a bit of health anxiety.
Right. But it's not.
No.
Right.
The core of this deep dive is that this obsession triggers a physiological feedback loop. It's not just in your head. It actively causes the biological stress the tracker claims to be measuring.
I'm really glad you brought us here, because this is where the forensic data gets deeply concerning. We really need to dissect the algorithmic nocebo effect.
Okay, let's establish terms for the listener. Most people know the placebo effect. You take a sugar pill, you expect to get better, and your body actually produces a positive physical response. The nocebo effect is the dark twin. It's the physiological manifestation of negative expectation. You expect a negative outcome, and your body manifests the actual negative symptom.
Exactly. Now, let's look at the morning routine of someone caught in this trap. They wake up. The very first thing they do, before they even get out of bed, is reach for their phone to check their sleep score.
I think we're all guilty of reaching for the phone first thing.
Sure. But neurologically, in this context, this acts as a dopaminergic slot machine pull. They are gambling for a reward, hoping for a score of 90 or 100.
But let's say they actually woke up feeling pretty good. They open their eyes, they feel refreshed, then they look at the screen, and the algorithm gives them a readiness score of, say, 55 out of 100. It flashes red and tells them they are severely unrecovered.
Which happens all the time.
Right.
Sure.
So what happens inside the body in that exact second?
Well, that subjective feeling of vitality instantly evaporates. That red screen acts as a threat signal. It immediately triggers the amygdala, your brain's fear center. The amygdala sounds the alarm and activates the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Within seconds, your body begins releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline directly into your bloodstream.
So it triggers a classic fight or flight response, just from looking at an app.
Yes. This sudden surge of cortisol shifts your autonomic nervous system completely away from the rest and digest parasympathetic state and throws you into sympathetic dominance.
Meaning your body thinks it's under attack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are now experiencing acute, measurable physiological stress. And here is the kicker. What happens to your heart when you're in a state of sympathetic dominance?
Your heart rate goes up, and it beats very rigidly, like very evenly spaced, which means your heart rate variability, your HRV, plummets.
Right. And what metric do almost all of these consumer sleep trackers use as their primary proxy for physical recovery and readiness?
HRV, oh, that is incredibly cynical.
It's a closed loop.
So, wait, the tracker tells you that you are stressed and unrecovered. The anxiety of seeing that bad score causes your HRV to drop, which means the algorithm literally forces your body to conform to its own negative prediction.
Exactly.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy orchestrated by a piece of plastic on your wrist. It's like having a digital fortune teller strapped to you that predicts you're going to have a terrible, stressful day and then literally injects you with stress hormones to make sure it happens.
That is the exact mechanism of the algorithmic nocebo effect. And what makes it so tragic is what researchers call the illusion of precision.
What does that mean?
We give these devices immense authority because they present us with highly specific, authoritative-looking data They don't just say you slept poorly. They tell you you had exactly 14% deep sleep.
Right. It looks like hard science.
But the truth is, while these gadgets are pretty good at telling if you are broadly asleep or awake based on your movement and heart rate, their ability to accurately map distinct sleep stages is flawed.
Like telling the difference between REM sleep and deep slow wave sleep.
Exactly. Compared to clinical medical equipment measuring brain waves, consumer wearables are highly suspect.
They are essentially guessing based on algorithms.
Yes, so you have these highly driven people restructuring their entire lives, triggering massive stress responses, and altering their neurochemistry based on an algorithmic model that isn't even clinically accurate.
That is just, it's a profound failure of technology. So what does this all mean for the listener? If you're a high performer and you've recognized yourself in this deep dive, how do you actually escape?
That's a vital question.
How do you reclaim your biological hardware and rebuild trust in your own body?
Well, the clinical sources we reviewed outline several specific, actionable protocols to break this dependency. And it really begins with attacking that slot machine dynamic in the morning.
Okay, what's step one?
The very first protocol is to establish a mandatory 15 to 30-minute offline buffer immediately upon waking.
Which sounds simple, but I know for a fact is incredibly difficult in practice. We are so conditioned to reach for the phone the second our eyes open.
It requires serious discipline. But the rule is, before you look at any screen, you must perform a subjective internal body scan.
An internal body scan.
Yeah. You sit up, stretch, and actively ask yourself, how do my joints feel? How is my mental clarity? Am I actually tired?
Right.
You force yourself to rate your own readiness before you allow an algorithm to tell you how you feel. You have to reteach your brain to trust its internal telemetry.
That makes total sense. You're manually overriding the system to rebuild the brain's internal feedback loop. What's the second protocol?
The second protocol addresses the anxiety of daily fluctuations. You have to stop reacting to daily volatility.
Because the scores bounce around a lot.
Exactly. Physiological data is inherently noisy. You might have eaten a late meal, experienced a brief spike of work stress, or maybe you're just slightly dehydrated.
And any of those can tank your daily sleep score.
Right. And if you panic over a single bad night, you trigger the nocebo effect. So instead, you evaluate your metrics purely on a rolling 7-day average.
Oh, okay.
A rolling average smooths out the daily noise and allows you to identify genuine physiological trends without the acute daily panic.
Okay, so internal scan first, then stick to a 7-day average. The third protocol, if I remember the stat correctly, brings us back to the biology we discussed at the very beginning. The SCN and the circadian rhythm.
Yes. You have to create a bedroom sanctuary.
Environmental hygiene.
Paramount. Keep the room cool, keep it pitch black, and remove all digital devices. Even low-level ambient light from a charging indicator can impair your metabolic control.
Let alone the blue light from a screen.
Exactly. And simply having the device within arm's reach stimulates psychological arousal.
If we go back to our IT analogy for a second, you wouldn't leave a critical company server exposed to a DOS attack. You shouldn't leave your nervous system exposed to algorithmic manipulation in the one place that's designed for recovery.
That is perfectly stated. Which brings us to the final and maybe the most radical protocol mentioned in the research.
Blind weekends.
Right. I wouldn't call it radical, personally, but it is highly effective. Blind weekends are structured, wearable free intervals.
So you just ditch the tech?
Completely. From Friday night to Monday morning, you take the watch off, you take the ring off. You deliberately sever the data feed to force an HPA axis reset.
It breaks the dependency. It forces you to navigate your weekend purely on biological intuition.
Because look, technology is a wonderful tool when it informs your intuition.
Right.
But the moment the software starts dictating the state of the hardware, the moment you feel tired just because an app told you to, the tool has become a profound liability.
I think that perfectly encapsulates the journey we've taken today. We started by diagnosing the very real biological crisis of sleep debt.
The DOS attack.
Exactly. How it crashes our master biological clock, plummets our satiety hormones like leptin, and sends our appetite into a total tailspin.
And we examined how hustle culture normalizes that fatigue, demanding executives operate at cognitive levels equivalent to legal intoxication, which drains billions from the macroeconomy.
And finally, we investigated the dark side of the supposed cure. We saw how our desperation to fix our biology leads us to outsource our bodily awareness to consumer algorithms.
The quantification trap.
We wake up, check a highly suspect score, and trigger an algorithmic nocebo effect that literally injects our bloodstream with the exact stress hormones we were trying to avoid in the first place.
It's a stark reminder that you really cannot solve a qualitative biological need with a purely quantitative, gamified mindset.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder. We spent this entire time talking about sleep trackers, readiness scores, and heart rate variability.
Yeah.
But if we are so quick to surrender our most fundamental biological sensation, our own internal judgment of whether or not we actually feel rested, to a proprietary machine learning algorithm, what other internal human instincts are we unknowingly outsourcing to big tech every single day?
Well, once you start looking for that dynamic, you will begin to see it everywhere.
It might just be time to install a firewall between our biology and our technology. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.